everybody. Thanks for being here today. Thanks, David. As he mentioned, my name is Dan Fike. I'm here with my friend and colleague, Shawna Martell. We are both senior staff engineers at Carta, and we are here today to talk about interviewing. We've interviewed a lot of engineers in our time, and we know firsthand how hard it can be to do it right. There are, frankly, way more ways to do it wrong than there are ways to do it right.
It's really true. So tell me if this sounds familiar. We have our interviewers here, Taylor and Raj, and they're paired on an interview today, and they probably did what most of us do before we have an interview. They each went and reviewed the candidate's resume. And Taylor really got a mid-level read on this candidate, while Raj came away more staff level. Why didn't they agree? Who knows? There's 1,000 different reasons that they could come to these different conclusions. So our candidate, Pat, shows up, gives a very solid senior performance. So now it's time to write our interview feedback. So what's going to happen? We're probably going to see something like this. So Taylor's answer is probably going to be yes, we should hire Pat, because she was impressed. Her feedback is likely to focus on the things that she was surprised to see in the candidate. Raj, on the other hand, is probably going to say no, don't hire this candidate, because he was disappointed. And his feedback's more likely to focus on the signal that he expected to see but didn't. So what happened here? We had the exact same performance that was observed by these two people, and we have these diametrically opposing opinions.
And it's from this information that we are somehow expected to make a decision about whether we will or will not hire this candidate. More importantly, it's from this information we're supposed to make a leveling decision. Like, Shawna, look at Pat's feedback here, and I want you to tell me, is Pat a senior engineer or is Pat a staff engineer?
Yes.
That's not helpful.
Strong yes.
That is still not helpful. The strong yes. You know, that reminds me. Here, put up the scale real quick. Who's used a scale like this when evaluating interview candidates before? Yeah, I see a lot of hands up. We've used it. I've used it at Carta. I've used it in previous companies too. The star was our strong yes. I want to see how this plays out in practice when we're trying to make a decision about a candidate. If somebody gets this red X, that means don't hire this candidate. If they get the thumbs down, don't hire this candidate. If they get the neutral sign, don't hire this candidate. If they get the thumbs up, maybe hire this candidate. And if they get the star, maybe hire this candidate, and maybe they're senior or something. I don't really know.
So we just wasted the vast majority of the scale on different flavors of no.
Exactly. It looks like a 5-point scale, but it's really just a 2-point scale. You know, we spend more of this real estate trying to describe how bad a candidate is instead of understanding how good they are. And again, we need to level a candidate out of this, and 2 points of granularity is just not enough to do that.
So to be really honest, we found that this quite simply didn't work for us. So we wanted to tell you about some of the changes that we've made at Carta that have increased our confidence in our leveling and hiring decisions. And there are 2 really big differences than what you see here on the screen. So now our interviews are entirely structured around gathering signal about specific attributes. And our rubrics, they define a structured and consistent definition for each of our attributes. We expect our interviewers to be gathering data, and that gives us the tools we need to be better equipped to ensure our outcomes are driven more by Carta's needs and less by the expectations of any given interviewer.
Sorry, Shawna, before you talk about rubrics, what do you mean by attributes exactly?
Good point. Basically, I mean this. So instead of saying yes or no, tell me how good the candidate is with the database, or do they understand service-oriented architecture? How well do they work with others, or how maintainable is their code? Give me the data that I need to make a leveling decision. So we don't need every interviewer who's just focused on a single slice of the candidate's ability to make a yes or no decision. And we certainly don't expect them to understand in excruciating detail exactly what a senior software engineer 2 performance looks like. What we need is for our hiring managers to be able to synthesize the entirety of the candidate profile and then make those decisions.
But Shawna, we only really have 60 minutes with the candidate. You can't get through 100 attributes in that time.
100 would be too many, and at the risk of being pedantic, that's 15. But I take your point. In any given interview, you're probably focusing on 6 or 7 of these for any interview. And this is what lets us focus on the candidate's strengths. If we had let's say we had 1 coding attribute, that means we have 1 level of granularity. Now our interviewers, they can really break it up into these 5 different coding skills that different candidates might bring to the table. And finally, with this list, we're better equipped to force alignment across our interviewers on exactly what signal we expect them to collect.
Okay, so now we know that there's somebody whose job is to measure software design, but I bet if you asked 2 people here, they would definitely not have the same opinion of what good and bad software design looks like.
I'm absolutely certain you're right, which is why we have our rubrics. So what I'm showing you here, this is our rubric for software design. And at Carta, this is quite literally the definition for this attribute. And I want to point out a few interesting things about our rubrics. So we've moved to a scale that goes from 0 to 4. And this allows us to better focus on how good the candidate is, not how bad they are. 1 doesn't necessarily mean no. It just means junior. And that also is interesting here that each incremental step, that is an increasingly impressive performance. So now when I'm looking at where a candidate falls in the scale, I have a kind of an idea of what their level is based on where they fall. Finally, and I think really this is the most important, this rubric exists entirely outside of any given interview question. So we've probably all worked on a system where you write a question, and then you write a rubric that describes different things the candidate might say when you ask them that question. We've flipped that entirely on its head. We know the signal that we want to collect, and this is what we use to inform the questions that we ask.
You know what my favorite thing is about the attributes and rubrics?
Tell me.
Is at the end of the day, what comes out of the interview process now is essentially a Dungeons & Dragons character sheet. Right? It's like each of these attributes is like an ability modifier, and you can go up to like +4, and if you look at how much it adds up to, it's probably going to be lower for lower level characters and probably higher for higher level characters, and a wizard's probably going to have more intelligence, and a fighter's going to have more strength.
Dan, that's right, but this is only a 10-minute talk.
Oh, sorry, Norma.
So well, it looks like this, and we don't call it a character sheet, maybe you call it a scorecard, but the idea is exactly the same. At the end of the interview, we can look at this and see at a glance exactly what our candidate's strengths are. And this is really only possible because of our rubrics. Everyone's operating with the same definition of what 3 out of 4 means for any given attribute. So now, instead of at the end of these interviews having to synthesize this giant wall of qualitative text that describes in exacting detail what happened in an interview, we have quantitative data that describes our candidate's performance.
Okay, and it's at this point that we're finally ready to make a leveling decision about somebody, right? So we can take this scorecard and we can hand it to the hiring manager, and we use a hiring committee to still make the decision the way that they used to. Only the inputs to that decision now are consistent from candidate to candidate, and they're more reflective of that candidate's actual ability than they are any particular interviewer's relative expectations. But that's not really even just all, is now that we have this structured quantifiable data, we can bring that historical data into the conversation. We can recognize that this senior decision is consistent with how we've made senior decisions in the past. And you know what? Maybe it's not. Maybe this particular candidate is the lowest performing senior candidate we would have hired all year. That's information we need to know. Maybe it means they're not really senior. Or maybe what it actually means is there's something about this candidate that isn't reflected in our attributes and rubrics today. And that's a bug in the system. This is a tool that we can use to identify that bug and squash it, right? We can hold ourselves accountable to improving this interview process from one candidate to the next. And it's not just that. This data is I can look at this data from 2022 and I can compare it to 2023, and I can make sure that our bar for a senior engineer is going up over time and not down. Now, some of you may be thinking this doesn't look any easier than what you're doing. It's frankly not meant to be easier. That's not the point. What this does is it makes the interviewing process less subjective and more data-driven. It's never going to be perfect. Frankly, if anybody figures out how to do it perfect, I would like them to tell me. But with this, we have the tools to make it incrementally less wrong over time, and that's actually pretty good.
So we're running up on time, but we had one really important point we wanted to make before we go, and that's that Carta is hiring. Thanks.
Thanks.